And we are back. Hi, it's Tuesday, and today we're going to look at anchor points, and we're also going to look at the challenge that we did yesterday. So let's start with that. Let's head it over to Flow, and this was the animation we worked on yesterday, right? So we were looking at easing curves, and here we were making an animation by using easing curves, actually step curves in particular, and we were playing with the opacities. All right, and the challenge was, how do you do this animation with only one layer? All right, let's give it a shot. So I'm just going to pause this. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to duplicate this properties timeline by right-clicking on it and hitting the duplicate option. Okay, so now we have a copy of our animation, and I don't want any of these animations in Flow or in our timeline. So I'm just going to actually delete 4 of the layers because we only want to have one layer, right? And then I'm going to open this and I'm going to delete that. And we're going to call this now by double clicking on there. On the timeline name, I double clicked on it. And we're just going to rename it to properties single layer so we know what it is whenever we export, if we export. Okay, so we have one layer, and we want it to animate from here and do those steps and go across here. So let's have a look one more time at this animation. Step, 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 just snapping into place. Okay, so in a way, we want to animate from here to the making on the stage so that they animate. And let's just move that over, and we'll get it close to where we need, and we're just going to tweak the position up here and to the right. We're going to make it 450. And now the next couple of steps we don't really need to worry about. We just need to make a couple of key values. So here we're going to say, I dragged the playhead of the timeline to any time after the first one and before the second one. And we're going to make that 150. And then the next one we're going to do, just going to move the timeline playhead again. We're going to make it 250. So right here, if you noticed, I had changed and it's still highlighted. So I can move that, and this value up here in the position is still highlighted, so I can actually make my changes like that. Okay, and so now we have our steps. So we're going to animate to here, and then to here, and then to here. Okay, but the timing is all off. The easiest way to make these animations all even is to select them all like that. You can press Command A, is what I just did, or you can area select the whole timeline, and moving the mouse way up to the top here, you see this option, distribute horizontally, boom. Now all of our key values in that timeline, or of all the key values that we had selected, they are evenly spaced. And now we have our animation that goes from here to here to here to here to here. And the next thing is a trick that we learned from yesterday. You can area select a bunch of key values, and then move, again, your easing curve up and to the right, and right here, or sorry, your mouse cursor, and right here you click on the easing button. And now we can change all of the key values to step right. So now we should have our steps. 1, 2, 3. But we didn't get the last one. Why didn't we get the last one? Well, we didn't get it because it switches right at the end. This is an easy fix. What we can do is, again, select the entire timeline, and then you grab this last key value and you start dragging, and then you press Shift. And what that's going to do, it's going to compress the entire selection that you have, and we're going to place that right at 1.6. So now all of our animations are evenly stepped, and we get the same effect with a single layer. And that's the answer to yesterday's challenge. Okay, so now I would like to look at anchor points. Steve Mancera actually had a great question on the Slack group. What are they and what do they do? So what we can do is we can go and have a look at making an animation or two with anchor points. Hold on, I'm going to switch back because we don't need to look at flow at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of small animations that have anchor point animations in them, or we're using anchor points to do rotations and to position things. Okay, and so we'll build and we'll try to build upon one idea over the other, and then we'll show a couple of nice effects that you can get from using anchor points. Okay, so let's switch back over to flow. I'm going to create a new project. Pressed Command N. It created this document. I'm going to save it by pressing Command S, and I'm going to call it anchor points FC5 because I think we're on the 5th one today. We're going to create an empty timeline by clicking on this button right here, and then I'm going to change the size of the scene just to make it an even 400 so that our numbers are even when we're moving things around. And let's go and select this and make that 400. So now it's 400 by 400. And the reason why it changed both at the same time is because I actually clicked this little lock icon that's in between these two numbers. So when that is on, it changes it proportionately. And when it is off, it's not going to change it proportionally. It'll change just whichever property, width or height, that you change yourself. Okay, let's add a layer. Now, I'm going to use a layer instead of a shape because it allows me to create a little group, and I'm going to show you what an anchor point actually looks like by using two things, a layer and another shape. So this will make sense in a second. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to hit insert, and I'm going to insert layer. All right, now I want to be able to see that empty layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a background color for it. And I'm going to turn on relative mode for now because I'm just going to do a little bit of design work and I don't want to track any changes that I'm making at the moment. So click on the background, relative mode is on. I'm going to change that to this dark color. And right here it's called layer. And now I'm going to add another little circle. And the circle, which I am going to make pink by clicking on the fill color. And I'm going to get rid of the stroke width. I'm going to select right here, down here, and make it 0. So now it's just like the fill color for that thing. And then I'm going to, again, I'm going to make the size and the width and height proportional by clicking on the lock between these two. And I'm going to make it 10 by 10. Okay, let's make it a little bit bigger. That's a bit small. Let's make it 20 by 20. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this dot as to show you where the anchor point is. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these two and we're going to turn them into a group. I'm actually going to drag the anchor point into the layer. And now we have our group, okay? So the anchor point here, the anchor point is the point of a layer. It's relative to the size and the shape of the layer around which the layer will rotate. It's also the point relative to the layer that we use for positioning the layer. Okay, so when I say the position is 100 by 100, the anchor point gets moved to that position, and then depending on what the anchor point is, the layer itself gets positioned relative to that point. Okay, so that's a little bit unclear, but it's easier if we go and have a look. So let's do that now. Okay, so the default for any layer is for the anchor point to be in the middle. And the way you can see that is by when you have it selected over here in the position, size, rotation panel, you'll see this anchor and these 9 little squares. And the one that's highlighted is where the anchor point sits. And so the default is that the anchor point is in the middle of the layer. What does that mean? That means that if I move that layer to, say, 0, the center that layer is going to be centered at 0 on the XY, and then if I do it on Y, now it's going to be centered at the top left. Now this has to do with the coordinate system and things like that. But as you can see, the center of the layer is the thing that's being positioned. Okay, so now I'm going to undo and undo. And we're back into the middle of the scene. Now, the anchor point is also the point around which the layer rotates. So let's add a 360-degree rotation to our animation. I'm going to move the timeline playhead to the end of our timeline. I'm going to turn off relative mode because now I want to be animating. And over here, I'm going to select this and I'm going to type 360 and I'm going to hit enter. Now, it doesn't look like anything changed, but it has. You can see that there's a new timeline. I'm going to go back to the beginning by clicking this button right here next to the play button, and we're going to play. Okay, so the rotation happens around the middle of the shape because the anchor point is in the middle. The position of the layer is in the middle. The rotation is in the middle. All right, so let's call this timeline middle, and let's go ahead and duplicate it. We're going to change the anchor point in this new timeline. We're going to change it to top left. Okay, so just quickly, I'm going to fire up the relative mode, and I'm going to take this layer and I'm just going to snap it into the top left corner. I'm going to turn that off. This is just an indicator of where the rotation is going to happen. And now that group, I'm going to change its its anchor point as well. With relative mode on, I'm going to click over here again in the anchor area of our transform panel. I'm going to click into the top left. So you see that dot is up there in the top left now. The animation is the same. The animation still goes from 0 to 360 degrees. And I'm going to hit play. So now the shape is rotating around the top left corner. It's still rotating around its anchor point, but the anchor point is now relative to the shape. It's in the top left corner. So now we're rotating around the top left corner. And in line with what we talked about before, if this was positioned at 0, 0, instead of being centered at the top left of the entire scene, the layer itself is now anchored, like the top left of the layer is at the top left of the scene because the anchor point is in the top left corner of the layer. Okay, so I'm going to press undo and undo. We're going to look at this animation one more time, just on loop. That's what the animation looks like. Okay. And now I want to show you what the bottom right looks like. We're going to duplicate one more time. We're going to call this bottom right. Rotation we're going to leave. We're going to turn on relative mode and do all the same tricks that we did before. And we're going to move that to the bottom right and then go over here. We're going to change the anchor point to the bottom right. Oops. We got to select that group. We're going to change the rotation of the group, or the anchor point of the group, to the bottom right, again over here. And now we're rotating around the bottom right corner of that shape. Okay. So you can actually use the anchor point to get some really nice effects. Let's just duplicate this one more time. And let's call this star. And what I want to do is I'm going to just delete. I'm going to delete this anchor point dot right here. It's going to create a layer for me. And we'll just call this L0. And I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it a bunch of times. And I'm going to turn on relative mode. I'm going to align everything like this and like this, and then move them all back into the center. I'm going to make sure that their anchor points are all in the middle as well. And now I am going to delete that rotation. And then here, one at a time, I'm going to say that this is going to go to, let's say, 22.5. The next one is going to be at 45. And the next one is going to be at what's 45? 67.5, 67.5. That was 67.2. Make it 0.5. And then the last one is going to go to 90. So this is the final shape. And now we can get this lovely little animation happening. Okay, let's slow it down a little bit so we can see it. All right, there you go. So you can use the anchor point to create some nice effects if you combine it with a little bit of smoke and mirrors. So here it looks like a square. Okay, let's actually make these a little bit bigger. I'm going to turn on relative mode and make sure that these are locked. Turn to 200. Turn off relative mode, and it looks like a square. A single square is turning into a star because all the layers have the same color. Okay, like that. Now, what else could we do here? Another nice thing about layers, or about anchor points, is that you can animate them. And I know that we're getting a little bit longer in time. There's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about in terms of advanced uses of anchor points. But for today, we're going to cap it off at just being able to animate the anchor points. Okay. So here's the top left and the bottom right, these two. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these two animations by adding onto them the animation from one anchor point to another. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to duplicate the bottom right, and we're going to say animated anchor point. And okay, we're going to say here that it starts at the bottom right and it rotates like that. We're not going to change the rotation. What we're going to do is we're going to change the anchor point at the end of the animation. And by the end of the animation, this dot here is going to go up like that, right up to there. Okay, so that, again, the dot has nothing to do with the animation. It's just a visual cue. And the anchor, we're going to change on the group to the top left. So what Flow tries to do is it tries to preserve the position of your animation or your layer when you animate things. So when I animated the anchor point, what it did is it created some X and Y, some additional X and Y animations to have it end up being in the same place as it was before I changed the anchor point. Okay, so it was in this position before, and it's in this position again. And so that requires changing the X and the Y position to accommodate for the movement of the anchor point. Okay, and this is what our animation looks like. Let's make it a little bit bigger like that. And okay, so you can see how the dot is moving through the animation. And if we go ahead and hide that, you start to get this motion of the square that's far more complicated than you could create without anchor points. All right. So the anchor point again is here, let's go back to live stream. I think we're going to cap it at that today. All right. So the anchor point is the point around which a layer rotates. It's also the point relative to the layer that we use for positioning. And you can create a bunch of different effects with it, which is really cool. And you can animate it. All right. So that's it for today. There's no challenges or anything like that for today because this is more of a learning one. What we're going to look at tomorrow are some really neat effects that you can create by doing some very simple things with the anchor point. Okay, see you soon.